My sister stood at the microphone in front of 200 people, our family, our investors, my professors, and said, I built Verilink from nothing. Every line of code, every client, every dollar. I did it alone. I was sitting at the table with my Harvard diploma still in my hand. I did not stand up. I did not correct her. I simply set the diploma down, picked up my glass of water, and took a slow sip. What Diana did not know was that the company she was bragging about, the $47 million company with her face on every press release, answered entirely to me. Every share, every patent, every vote, and the signature she needed to keep her title? She had just made sure I would never give it. Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. And hit like and subscribe if you have ever watched someone take credit for everything you built and said nothing. Because you knew your time was coming. People always assumed Diana was the Bennett who mattered. She was 6 years older, sharper in a room, the kind of woman who remembered every name and made every handshake feel like a contract. Growing up in Wellesley, Massachusetts, in a house with cream-colored trim and a two-car garage, Diana was the one our mother introduced first at dinner parties. Diana is in finance. Diana just got promoted. Diana is doing something remarkable with her life. I was the other one. Not invisible exactly, just quieter. I was the one who spent Friday nights debugging code on a secondhand ThinkPad while Diana was out networking at alumni mixers. I was the one who read patent law for fun at 19, who built a small inventory management tool for a local restaurant at 22 and charged them $80 for it. I thought that was a lot of money then. I was wrong about a lot of things then. Our mother, Judith Bennett, loved us both. I believe that. But love, in our house, had a way of flowing in one direction and pooling there. Diana got the law school fund. I got a used laptop and a speech about resourcefulness. Diana got the introductions to the right people. I got told that I was too serious, too internal, that I needed to learn how to work a room the way Diana worked a room. I stopped trying to explain myself somewhere around age 24. It was easier, what nobody in my family understood, what I never corrected them on, not once, was that the quietness was not weakness, it was patience. There is a difference, and it took me years to stop apologizing for it. I founded Verilink Solutions 3 weeks after my 26th birthday, not with Diana, not with anyone. I founded it alone, on a Tuesday night in November, in a 400-square-foot apartment in Cambridge that smelled like old radiator heat and whatever my neighbor was cooking through the wall. I had $200 in my checking account, a 6-year-old laptop, and an idea that I had been turning over in my mind for almost 2 years. The idea was simple, the way most good ideas are simple when you finally strip away everything unnecessary. Mid-size B2B companies were losing an average of $340. Zero per year to workflow redundancy, tasks that 2 or 3 departments were doing simultaneously without knowing it. The software solutions on the market were either too expensive, too clunky, or built for enterprises 10 times their size. I built something that fit exactly in that gap: clean interface, predictive overlap detection, integration with the tools those companies were already using. I called it Verilink. I filed the patent on a Thursday. Patent number US 10,847,302. I still have the confirmation email. I have never deleted it. The company was registered in Massachusetts on November 19th. Sole founder, Ashley Marie Bennett. One signature. Mine. I brought Diana in 8 months later. I want to be clear about that. Because it matters. I chose her. She did not find me. I called her on a Sunday morning and told her I had something real, that I needed someone who could handle the financial side and the client relationships while I stayed focused on the product. Diana was between jobs. She had a sharp mind for numbers and a sharper instinct for reading people in a room. She was genuinely the right person for what I needed, what I did not tell her, what I told only my attorney Marcus Webb. On the afternoon, we drew up the agreements. Was the structure underneath everything? Diana would be CFO. She would have her name on the website, her face at the conferences, her voice on the investor calls. She would be the public presence of Verilink, because I was starting my MBA at Harvard in the fall and I needed someone the outside world could see. But the ownership structure was locked. 61% voting shares, Ashley Bennett. 39% non-voting, minority stake, Diana Bennett. The distinction between voting and non-voting was buried in paragraph 14 of a 40-page founder's agreement that Diana signed without reading past page 3. I know that sounds cold. Maybe it was. But I had built the thing. I had written every line of the original code. I had filed the patent alone at 2 in the morning with a cup of cold coffee and no one to call. I was not going to hand over control of it because Diana was better at small talk. Marcus drew up one additional clause that afternoon, a mutual non-disparagement and non-misrepresentation agreement. Simple language. If either party publicly misrepresented the founding, ownership, or intellectual origin of Verilink Solutions, the offending party's shares would be subject to immediate forced buyout at original valuation, well below market rate, and all voting rights would consolidate to the non-offending party. Diana signed it on page 31 without comment. Marcus and I shook hands. I drove back to Cambridge. I ordered Thai food and went back to work on the product. That was 4 years before my graduation party. 4 years of Diana traveling to San Francisco and Chicago and Austin. 4 years of Diana accepting awards on behalf of the company, shaking hands with venture capitalists, being quoted in Boston Business Journal. 4 years of my mother forwarding me those articles with little notes. Isn't Diana doing wonderfully? 4 years of holiday dinners where the conversation circled Diana's vision, Diana's leadership, Diana's instincts. I finished my MBA. I built the Series B pitch deck in my apartment in Allston, alone, the same way I had built everything else. I kept my name off the press releases on purpose. I was not ready to surface. I was still building. I was 28 pages into the Series B narrative document the morning of my Harvard commencement. I wore my gown. I walked across the stage. I shook the dean's hand. I held my diploma and felt something settle in my chest. Not pride exactly, more like the particular quiet of a person who has been working toward something for a very long time and can finally see the shape of it clearly. My mother took a photo of me outside the ceremony hall. In it, I am smiling. Diana is standing slightly in front of me. That should have told me something. The party was Diana's idea. She had booked the Wellesley Hills Country Club 3 months in advance. The main dining room, not the side terrace, 200 covers, a jazz quartet, past appetizers and an open bar and white tablecloths with small vases of cream-colored roses. She told my mother it was a graduation celebration. She told the guests it was a celebration of everything the Bennett family had built. I should have noticed the phrasing then. I arrived at 6:15 in a black dress I had bought the previous week at a consignment shop on Newbury Street, $42. I mentioned that only because Diana's aunt was wearing something that cost, conservatively, $800. She had her hair done. She had a photographer. When I walked in, she was already at the center of the room with a glass of champagne, laughing at something a man in a gray suit was saying. And she looked exactly like a woman who had planned this evening very carefully, and for reasons that had nothing to do with my diploma. Marcus Webb was there. I had invited him myself quietly, 2 weeks before. He was standing near the bar with a glass of sparkling water and an expression that gave nothing away. We made brief eye contact when I walked in. He gave a small nod. I moved on. The first hour was fine. I circulated. I accepted congratulations. My aunt from Providence hugged me and said I looked thin. My father's old college roommate, who I had met twice in my life, shook my hand and said Harvard, huh, and then turned back to his conversation. A woman I recognized from Verilink's last investor briefing touched my arm and said she hadn't realized Diana's sister was graduating. Diana's sister. I smiled and said, thank you, and moved toward the appetizer table. Dinner was served at 7:30. I was seated at the head table, which felt right, until I realized the name cards had been arranged so that Diana sat at the actual head, the chair with the clearest sightline to the room, and I was 2 seats to her left. Between my mother and a Verilink board member named Gerald Chu, who spent the salad course telling me about his recent golf trip to Pebble Beach, I ate my salmon. I listened to Gerald talk about par fours. I watched Diana across the table, the way she laughed and leaned in and touched people's arms at exactly the right moment, and I felt something I had not expected to feel that evening. I felt tired, not angry, not bitter, just tired, in the way you get tired when you have been patient for a very long time. And you can see, clearly, that the patience is about to end. At 8:45 the jazz quartet stopped playing. Diana stood up. She did not ask for a microphone. One appeared anyway. The kind of evening where things appear for Diana without her having to ask. She tapped it once, smiled at the room, and the 200 people settled into the particular quiet of an audience that expects to be entertained. I want to take a moment, she said, to share something with the people in this room who matter most to me. I set down my fork. 4 years ago I had an idea. A simple idea, that mid-sized companies were bleeding money on inefficiency, and that the right software built the right way could fix it. She paused, smiled. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if anyone would believe in it. But I built it anyway, line by line, client by client. From nothing, the room was warm. Someone near the back made a sound of appreciation. Verilink Solutions is valued at $47 million today. Another pause. I built that, and I am proud of it. Applause. Genuine, warm, unhurried applause. My mother was clapping with both hands raised slightly, the way she clapped at Diana's college graduation, at Diana's first promotion, at every moment she had decided, privately and permanently, belonged to her older daughter. I sat with my hands in my lap. I looked at Diana. She was looking at the room, scanning it the way she always did, collecting the energy of it, filing it away. Then her eyes landed on me briefly, the way you glance at a piece of furniture. She did not falter. She lifted her glass. To Verilink, she said, and to the people who believed in me from the beginning. 200 glasses went up. Gerald Chu clinked mine without looking away from Diana. My mother was beaming. The photographer moved in for a closer shot of Diana's face, luminous and certain, and the flash went off twice. I did not raise my glass. I did not stand up. I did not say her name. I did not correct a single word. I picked up my water glass and drank slowly, and looked at the cream-colored roses in the center of the table, and thought about paragraph 31 of a 40-page agreement that Diana had signed 4 years ago in Marcus Webb's office on a Tuesday afternoon. She had just triggered it, not by accident, not out of ignorance. Diana had read enough to know what she was signing. She was a CFO. She understood contracts. She had made a choice, tonight, in front of 200 witnesses, with a photographer capturing the timestamp, to stand up and say I built this, alone, from nothing. She had just handed me everything. When the applause faded and Diana sat back down, and the jazz quartet started again, I excused myself from the table. I walked through the dining room, past the bar, through the side door, and out onto the stone terrace that overlooked the 18th hole. It was late April and the air was cold and smelled like cut grass and distant rain. I stood there for 4 minutes. Then I took out my phone and sent Marcus Webb a single text message. It said, she said it publicly, full room, photographer present. His reply came in 40 seconds. It said, I know. I was recording. See you Monday. I put my phone back in my bag. I stood in the cold for another minute, looking out at the dark fairway. Then I smoothed my $42 dress, went back inside, and finished my dessert. I slept 9 hours that night. People assume that moments like that one, sitting at a table while someone dismantles your life's work in front of 200 people, would leave you awake until 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, rehearsing arguments you will never make. Maybe that is true for some people. For me, the opposite happened. I got home at 10:30, washed my face, made chamomile tea, and was asleep by 11:15. I think it was because, for the first time in 4 years, I did not have to wait anymore. The waiting had been the hard part. Not the work. The work was fine. The work was the only part of any of this that ever made complete sense to me. The hard part was the patience, sitting at holiday dinners while my mother forwarded Diana's press clippings, watching Verilink's name appear in Boston Business Journal under Diana's photograph, listening to investors on calls refer to Diana's company, Diana's vision, Diana's roadmap, knowing exactly what was mine and choosing, deliberately, to say nothing. 4 years of that will tire you in a specific way that is hard to explain to someone who has not done it. But, on the night of my graduation party, I slept like a person who had just set something down that they had been carrying for a very long time. Because Diana had made her move, publicly, on the record, in front of witnesses. With photographic evidence and a man with a voice recorder standing 12 feet away, the clause was activated. The rest was paperwork. Monday I was at Marcus Webb's office at 8:15. His office was on the 14th floor of a building in Back Bay, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Charles River. I had been to that office 11 times over the course of 4 years, each time to review Verilink's legal status, update the ownership records, or simply to sit across from the one person in my life who knew the full picture and confirm that the picture had not changed. Marcus was already at his desk when I arrived. He had a legal pad in front of him and 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one for me, black the way I always took it. He remembered small things like that. It was one of the reasons I trusted him. Good weekend? He asked. Productive, I said. He smiled and slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a transcript of Diana's speech, timestamped 8:47 p.m. April 22nd at the Wellesley Hills Country Club. Marcus had run the audio through a transcription service overnight. Every word was there. I built it, line by line, client by client, from nothing, highlighted in yellow. Beneath the transcript was a clause-by-clause breakdown of the founders' agreement, specifically Section 9C, the Mutual Non-Disparagement and Misrepresentation Clause. Marcus had annotated it in red pen. 3 places where Diana's speech made direct, provable contact with the language of the agreement. She hit all 3 triggers, Marcus said. Public forum, deliberate misattribution of founding, documented witnesses. I turned the page. And the shares? Under Section 9 Psi I, her 39% converts to a forced buyout option at original valuation, which, as you know, was set at the company's value on founding date. He paused. That's not 47 million, that's 400,000. I set the folder down. What's the timeline? We send notice today. She has 30 days to respond. If she contests, it goes to arbitration. But the contract is clean, Ashley. I drafted it myself. There's nothing to contest. I nodded. Outside the window, a crew team was moving up the Charles in the early morning light, 8 rowers, in perfect unison, the coxswain calling the stroke from the stern. I watched them for a moment. Send the notice, I said. Marcus reached for his pen. There's one more thing. He opened a second folder. Inside was a letter. Not from his office, but from the lead partner at Aldridge Capital, the venture firm I had been in conversation with for 7 months about the Series B round. The letter confirmed their intent to proceed with a $23 million investment in Verilink Solutions. Pending confirmation of governance structure and founding documentation, they want to announce in 60 days, Marcus said. They need the cap table clean before then. It will be clean, I said. I know. He clicked his pen. I also think you should consider informing the board before Diana receives the notice. Give Raymond Holt 24 hours of context before she calls him in a panic. Raymond Holt was chairman of Verilink's board of directors. A quiet, precise man in his late 60s who had made his money in enterprise software in the 90s and spent the last decade serving on boards and reading history books. He had been one of my first calls when I began assembling the board 2 years earlier. I had told him everything then, the full structure, the ownership split, the reason Diana was the visible face of the company. He had listened without interrupting, asked 4 questions, and said, "That is either very smart or very dangerous. And I suppose we will find out which." He had been patient in his own way. "Call Raymond this afternoon," I said. "Tell him I will come in person on Wednesday." Marcus made a note. "And your mother?" I looked at him. "She will hear about the notice," he said, not unkindly. "Diana will call her within the hour." I thought about my mother at the dinner table, both hands raised, clapping for a speech that rewrote 4 years of my life in 8 minutes. I thought about the way she had looked at Diana across the cream-colored roses. I thought about the photograph. Diana slightly in front, me just behind, smiling in a dress that cost $42. "My mother," I said, "will call me when she's ready. And when she does, I'll answer." I picked up the coffee Marcus had set out for me. It had gone slightly cool. I drank it anyway. "Send the notice," I said again. Marcus Webb nodded, reached for his phone, and began to dial. I sat in the chair by the window and watched the crew team disappear around the bend in the river, moving fast and clean and perfectly together. And I thought about the Series B deck sitting open on my laptop at home, 28 pages in, needing maybe 6 more. I had work to do. The notice arrived at Diana's apartment on a Wednesday morning at 10:47. I know the exact time because Marcus had it hand-delivered by a process server. Not mailed, not emailed, not sent through any channel Diana could later claim she had not received. A human being in a gray jacket walked into the lobby of her building on Commonwealth Avenue, took the elevator to the 9th floor, knocked on her door, and placed a sealed envelope in her hand. Marcus texted me the confirmation at 10:49. I was in the Verilink office at that moment, in the small conference room we used for product reviews, going through a UI redesign with our head of engineering, a quiet man named Theo Park, who had been with the company since year 2 and who knew, because I had told him directly 6 months earlier, exactly who had built what. Theo was one of 4 people inside Verilink who understood the full ownership structure. The others were our head of legal, our CFO of record, which was still technically Diana, and Raymond Holt. When Marcus's text came through, I set my phone face down on the table and kept going through the UI mock-ups. There were 12 screens to review. We got through 11 of them before my phone started ringing. Deanna. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. I declined it. The third call came 90 seconds later, and I turned the phone over, looked at the screen, and said to Theo, "Give me 10 minutes." He nodded and left the room without asking anything. I did not answer Diana's call. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulled up the founder's agreement, and read Section 9 one more time. Not because I needed to. I had read it enough times over 4 years that I could recite it without looking. I read it because there is something clarifying about returning to the original document. The actual language, the actual signatures, the actual date, when everything around you is about to become very loud. The language was clean. Marcus was a meticulous man. Every term was defined, every trigger was specific. Every consequence was enumerated in plain English, with no room for creative interpretation. I closed the laptop. Then I opened the second drawer of the conference room cabinet, where I had placed a manila folder 3 days earlier, and I took out what was inside. The first document was the original patent filing for Verilink's core algorithm, patent number US 10,847,302, filed November 21st, 6 years ago. Inventor, Ashley Marie Bennett, Assini, Verilink Solutions LLC. The patent office seal was in the upper right corner, blue ink, slightly faded now from being folded and unfolded more times than I could count. The second document was the original Certificate of Formation for Verilink Solutions LLC, filed with the Massachusetts Secretary of State on November 19th, same year. Organizer and sole member, Ashley Marie Bennett. The state seal at the bottom, dark red. The third document was the fully executed Founders Agreement, all 40 pages, tabbed and indexed by Marcus's paralegal, with Diana's signature on page 31 in blue ballpoint. I have looked at that signatures many times. It is quick and slightly cramped, the signature of a person moving through paperwork they consider a formality. She signed it next to her printed name and the date, which was a Tuesday in late spring, and Marcus had initialed every page. The fourth document was a letter from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, confirming that no challenge to patent number US 10,847,032 had been filed, sustained, or was pending as of the previous Friday. The fifth document was a one-page summary prepared by Marcus showing the complete capitalization table of Verilink Solutions as of that morning. 2 entries. Ashley Marie Bennett, 61% voting shares. Diana Claire Bennett, 39% non-voting shares, subject to forced buyout per Section 9 of Founders Agreement. Notice issued April 25th. I laid all 5 documents side by side on the conference room table. I looked at them for a moment. The patent, the formation certificate, the agreement, the USPTO letter, the cap table. 4 years of a secret laid out in 5 pieces of paper on a conference room table in Back Bay on a Wednesday morning. People sometimes ask, not yet, but they will, why I structured it this way, why I kept myself invisible for 4 years, why I let Diana stand at that microphone, why I let my mother believe what she believed, why I said nothing at holiday dinners and investor calls and every other moment when I could have simply told the truth. The honest answer has 2 parts. The first part is strategic. When I started the MBA program at Harvard, I needed someone running the operational side of Verilink full-time. Diana was effective at that. She was genuinely good at the client relationships, at the financial reporting, at being the face in the room. I needed those things done, and she did them. The arrangement worked because it was supposed to work. I designed it to work. I was not hiding. I was building. The second part is harder to explain. I grew up being told, in 100 small ways, that I was the one who would need to prove herself. That Diana's instincts were sharper, her presence more commanding, her path more obvious. I internalized that for longer than I should have. And somewhere around the 3rd year of the MBA, sitting alone in my apartment going through Aldridge Capital's term sheet at midnight, I realized something. I did not need anyone to believe in me before I was ready to be believed in. I needed the patent, I needed the agreement. I needed the cap table and the formation certificate and the USPTO letter. I needed all 5 of those pieces of paper to be clean and dated and undeniable before I walked into any room and said, "This is mine," because when I finally said it, I did not want it to be my word against Diana's. I wanted it to be the truth against nothing. I put the 5 documents back in the manila folder. I placed the folder in my bag. I called Marcus back. "She's going to contest it," I said when he picked up. "She already called," he said. "Her attorney reached out 40 minutes ago. They're claiming the clause is unenforceable. On what grounds?" Ambiguity in the term public misrepresentation, a pause. It won't hold. The transcript is timestamped. The audio is clean. The venue was a ticketed event with a guest list. There is nothing ambiguous about what she said or where she said it. How long until arbitration? If she files a challenge, 60 days. "But Ashley," he stopped. "What?" "She also called Raymond Holt this morning. Before I could reach him, I sat with that for a moment. Outside the conference room window, I could see Theo at his desk, headphones on, scrolling through the UI mock-ups we had not finished. The office was quiet. Someone had made coffee. The smell of it drifted under the door. "What did she tell him?" I asked. Marcus's voice was careful. "She told him you had fabricating documents, that the patent was filed fraudulently, that you had manipulated her into signing an agreement she didn't understand." I looked at the bag where I had placed the manila folder. "Raymond is expecting my call," Marcus said. "I told him you would reach out by noon." "I'll go in person," I said. "Today." "This afternoon I thought you might say that." Another pause. "Bring the folder." I looked at my watch. It was 11:22. I had a product review to finish, a Series B deck with 6 pages still unwritten, and a board chairman who had just received a phone call designed to make him doubt everything he thought he knew about his company. I zipped my bag closed. "Tell Theo I'll be back by 4, I said. "We'll finish the mock-ups then." Raymond Holt's office was not in a tower. That surprised people who did not know him. A man who had sold his enterprise software company for $340 million in 2003 and spent the subsequent 2 decades serving on the boards of 12 companies. You would expect glass and steel and a receptionist behind a curved desk. Instead, Raymond worked out of a converted brownstone on Marlborough Street, 3 blocks from the public garden, in an office that smelled like old books and printer ink, and the particular mustiness of a room where serious thinking gets done without anyone watching. I had been there 4 times before. Each time, Raymond had been behind his desk when I arrived, reading something, and each time he set it down immediately when I walked in, as if whatever he was reading was simply a way of passing time until the next conversation worth having. He was behind his desk when I arrived at 1:15. He was not reading. He was looking at his phone, and when I knocked on the open door, he looked up and something in his expression shifted. Not alarm exactly, but the particular attention of a man who has been in enough difficult rooms to recognize when one is about to begin. "Ashley," he said. "Sit down." I sat. I placed my bag on the floor beside the chair. I did not take out the folder yet. "She called you this morning," I said. At 8:52, he folded his hands on the desk. She was not calm, I imagine not. "She told me the founding documents were fabricated, that the patent was filed under your name without her knowledge or consent, that she had been," he paused, choosing the word carefully, "manipulated into signing an agreement she did not fully understand." I nodded. "What did you tell her?" "I told her I would look into it." He looked at me steadily. "Which is what I am doing now." Raymond Holt was 67 years old, with the kind of face that had been weathered by decades of boardrooms and bad news and decisions that cost people things. He had gray eyes and a deliberate way of speaking, each sentence placed carefully, nothing wasted. I had liked him from the first conversation. He reminded me of Marcus in that way. Both of them were men who understood that the most useful thing you can do in a complicated situation is slow down. I reached into my bag and took out the manila folder. I set it on his desk and opened it. The 5 documents, side by side. He looked at them without touching them for a moment. Then he leaned forward and picked up the patent filing. He read it slowly. He set it down and picked up the certificate of formation. He read that too. Then the founder's agreement. He spent longer on that one, turning pages carefully, pausing at certain sections. When he reached page 31, he looked at Diana's signature for a moment before turning to the cap table summary. He read everything twice. When he was done, he set the last document down and leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "How long have you had these?" he asked. "The patent and formation certificate since founding." "The agreement since year 1. The cap table summary Marcus prepared last Friday in anticipation of the notice. And the board? You knew the ownership structure. The others knew Diana was CFO. They did not know the voting split." He was quiet for a moment. Outside, a car moved slowly down Marlborough Street. Someone that saw was walking a very large dog. "She also told me," Raymond said, "that you had been planning this for years. That the clause in the agreement was a trap. That you never intended to give her a fair position in the company." I had expected this. I had thought about how to answer it during the drive over, sitting in traffic on Com Ave, with the folder on the passenger seat. "She has 39% of a company valued at $47 million, I said. If she had read the agreement she signed, she would have understood that 39% non-voting was the position I was offering. She accepted it. She signed it. She was a CFO with 15 years of financial experience. The idea that she did not understand what she was signing is not something I can make true by agreeing with it. Raymond looked at me. And the clause? The clause was not a trap, I said. It was a boundary. There is a difference, I paused. I built Verilink, I filed the patent, I incorporated the company, I wrote the original code. Those are facts, and they are documented. I was willing to let Diana be the public face of this company for 4 years, while I completed my education and built the Series B relationships. But I was not willing to let the foundational truth of what I built get permanently rewritten. The clause was there to protect that. Diana knew it was there. She signed it. Raymond picked up the founder's agreement again and turned to the clause. He read it one more time, then he set it down and said, "The speech at the country club. April 22nd, I said. 8:47 p.m., 200 witnesses, a photographer. Marcus Webb was present with a voice recorder. I saw the transcript this morning." He looked at me. "Did you know she was going to say it?" I considered the question honestly. I suspected she might do something like it eventually. I did not know it would be that night, in that room. But you had Marcus there. "I invited Marcus to my graduation party," I said. "He is my attorney and my friend." I did not ask him to record Diana's speech. He made that decision independently, because he knows the legal context, and he understood what was at stake. I paused. I'm glad he did. Raymond was quiet again. He had a way of sitting with silence that most people found uncomfortable. I had learned, over 4 years of knowing him, to simply wait it out. "Diana is going to fight this," he said finally. "I know. Her attorney is already talking about arbitration. She will also talk to the press, almost certainly. There will be a version of this story that makes you look calculating, and her look like a victim." "Yes," I said. "Does that concern you?" I looked at the 5 documents on his desk. The patent with its blue seal, the formation certificate with its dark red stamp, the agreement with Diana's quick, slightly cramped signature on page 31. "Raymond," I said, "I have been letting someone else tell the story of what I built for 4 years. I am not concerned about her telling one more version of it. I am concerned about getting the Series B closed, getting the cap table clean, and building the next phase of this company the right way." I paused. "The documents are real. The patent is real. The signature is real. Whatever story Diana tells, she is going to have to tell it in front of those 5 pieces of paper." He looked at me for a long moment, then he picked up his pen and wrote something on the legal pad in front of him. I could not see what it was. "I want to call an emergency board meeting," he said, "Thursday of next week. I want all 4 members present, and I want Marcus Webb there with the complete legal file." He looked up. "Can you have everything ready by then?" "It's already ready," I said. He nodded. He looked at the documents one more time, then closed the folder carefully and slid it back across the desk toward me. "You should keep these," he said. I put the folder back in my bag. "One more thing," Raymond said as I stood to leave. I waited the Aldrich Capital letter. He looked at me evenly. "I assume you have that as well." "It's in the deck," I said. "Page 4. For the first time since I had walked in, Raymond Holt almost smiled. "Thursday," he said. 9 o'clock. I shook his hand and walked out into the afternoon, where the public garden was 3 blocks away, and the trees were the particular green of late April, and the city moved around me exactly as it always did, indifferent and enormous and full of people who had no idea what was about to happen. I had 6 pages of a Series B deck to finish. I went home and got to work. The week between Raymond's office and the board meeting was the strangest week of my adult life, not because anything dramatic happened. The opposite, actually. From the outside, that week looked almost normal. I went to the Verilink office every morning. I sat at my desk. I finished the Series B deck, all 34 pages, including the 6 I had been putting off, which turned out to be the easiest 6 once I finally sat down and wrote them. I reviewed the Q1 financial summary with Theo. I took a call with a potential enterprise client in Atlanta who had been in the pipeline for 3 months. I ate lunch at my desk 4 days out of 5 and walked home along the esplanade each evening because the weather had turned warm and the river was flat and silver in the late afternoon light, and walking helped me think. From the inside, I was watching everything very carefully. Deanna moved fast. I will give her that the first thing she did was call every board member individually. I know this because Raymond told me, and because Gerald Chu, the golf enthusiast from my graduation dinner, sent me an email on Tuesday morning that said simply, "Ashley, Diana reached out yesterday. I want you to know I am reserving judgment until Thursday. Raymond has briefed me on the documents. GC." It was the most useful email Gerald Chu had ever sent me. The second thing Diana did was call our mother. I know this because my mother called me on Monday evening at 7:15. I was on the esplanade when the call came in, halfway across the pedestrian bridge, the river going gold below me in the last of the daylight. I looked at the name on the screen for a moment. Then I answered, "Ashley?" My mother's voice was tight in the way it got when she was trying to control something, the register she used when she was angry but had decided anger was not the right tool. Diana called me. I assumed she would, I said. She says you are trying to take her company. I kept walking. The bridge swayed slightly underfoot the way it always did. Mom, Verilink is not Diana's company. It never was. I can show you the documents if you'd like to see them. A pause. She says the documents are fabricated. They're not. Ashley, Mom, I stopped walking. I stood at the center of the bridge with the river below me and the city behind me, and I said, as clearly and as quietly as I could, I founded Verilink. I filed the patent. I incorporated the company. I have every document, every signature, every timestamp. This is not a dispute about the facts. The facts are not in dispute. I paused. Diana stood up at my graduation party and told 200 people that she built my company from nothing. She did it on purpose, in front of witnesses, and it triggered a legal clause in an agreement she signed. That is what is happening. Silence. She's your sister, my mother said finally. I know that, I said. She has given everything to that company. She has given 4 years to a company I built, I said. She was compensated for those 4 years. She has 39% equity. At current valuation, that is $18 million, Mom. Even under the forced buyout at original valuation, she walks away with $400,000 for 4 years of work. I paused. I am not taking anything from her that was ever hers. My mother did not respond immediately. I could hear her breathing. She said, "You planned this," my mother said, "that the whole thing was a trap from the beginning." I thought about the November night 6 years ago when I filed the patent alone, in my Cambridge apartment with cold coffee and no one to call. I thought about the 40-page agreement and page 31 and Diana's quick signature. I thought about 4 years of holiday dinners and forwarded press clippings and the photograph from my graduation where Diana stood slightly in front of me. I protected what I built, I said. That's not a trap. That's just good legal practice. Another silence. I don't know what to believe, my mother said. I know, I said. Thursday will help with that. I ended the call and stood on the bridge for another minute watching the river. Then I put my phone in my pocket and walked the rest of the way home. Diana's third move came on Wednesday. I was in the office, in my usual spot by the window, when Theo appeared in my doorway with an expression I had not seen on him before, careful, slightly uncomfortable, the look of someone delivering news they wish they did not have. There's a story, he said. Tech section. Boston Business Journal online. I held out my hand. He handed me his phone. The headline read, Verilink CFO Diana Bennett alleges founding document dispute with silent co-founder. I read the article carefully. It was 340 words. Diana had given a statement through her attorney. She had not spoken on the record herself, which told me her legal team had some sense, at least. The statement described a serious dispute over the authenticity of founding documents and alleged that Diana had been the operational and creative force behind Verilink's growth, while a co-founder had remained uninvolved during the company's formative years. Co-founder, not sole founder, not the person who built it. Co-founder, her attorney had talked her back from the edge slightly, but not far enough. I read the article twice. Then I handed the phone back to Theo. Forward it to Marcus, I said, and pull up the original patent filing. I want a copy made of the USPTO confirmation letter. Theo nodded and left. I turned back to my window. Below on Boylston Street, a delivery truck was double parked, and a cyclist was navigating around it with practiced irritation, and a woman was walking 3 small dogs, D's, in the same direction at 3 entirely different speeds. The city went about its business. I thought about what Raymond had said. She will talk to the press. There will be a version of this story that makes you look calculating and her look like a victim. He was right. That article was the beginning of that version. I was not particularly concerned. Versions of stories are told in newspapers. The actual story was told in courtrooms, in arbitration rooms, in boardrooms on Thursday mornings at 9 o'clock. And in those rooms, the only version that mattered was the one you could put on a table in 5 pieces of paper and prove. I had 5 pieces of paper, Diana's statement through an attorney, and a headline in a trade publication. I opened the Series B deck and read through it one final time. 34 pages, clean, precise, documented. Page 4, the Aldridge Capital letter, $23 million pending governance confirmation. The cap table, 2 entries. Page 12, the patent summary, with the filing date and the USPTO confirmation number. I read it all the way through without stopping. Then I closed the laptop, packed my bag, and went home early for the first time in 3 weeks. I made pasta. I opened a bottle of wine, a good one, a Willamette Valley Pinot I had been saving since Christmas. I sat at my kitchen table and ate dinner alone and listened to the city outside my window, and I thought about Thursday. I was ready. I had been ready for 4 years. But there was one more thing Diana did not know. Raymond Holt had made 2 phone calls on Tuesday afternoon that he mentioned to me only briefly at the end of a check-in call Wednesday evening. The first was to the lead partner at Aldridge Capital, confirming that the governance documentation would be in order before the board meeting. The second was to the Verilink Company Gala Committee. The annual Verilink Gala, our end-of-year celebration for clients, partners, and investors, had been scheduled for 6 weeks from Thursday, 300 attendees. The Charles Hotel Ballroom, dinner and a formal program, including the annual presentation of the company's Founder Recognition Award, which had been given, every year for the past 3 years, to Diana Bennett Raymond, had called the committee to make one change to the program. He told me this in the same tone he used for everything. Measured, precise, no unnecessary emphasis. I moved the founder recognition presentation to the top of the program, he said. Before dinner, I thought it was better placed there this year. I was quiet for a moment. Who's presenting it? I asked. I am, he said. I always present it, and who's receiving it? A pause. That, Raymond said, will depend on what happens Thursday morning. He said goodnight and ended the call. I finished my wine. I washed the glass. I set it on the drying rack and turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. Thursday was 8 hours away. I arrived at the Verilink boardroom at 8:45. Marcus was already there. He had taken the chair to the left of the head of the table and arranged his files in the precise, unhurried way he arranged everything. Folders stacked in order, legal pad centered, 2 pens parallel to each other on the right side. He had a cup of coffee and a bottle of water, and the particular stillness of a man who had been in enough high-stakes rooms to find them unremarkable. She's bringing her attorney, he said when I walked in. I assumed. His name is Craig Hollis. He's out of a firm in Waltham. Corporate litigation, mostly employment disputes. Marcus paused. He's competent. Not exceptional. I set my bag down and took the chair at the head of the table. I had not planned to sit there. It was technically Raymond's seat. But when I walked in, it was the only chair that felt right, and I sat down without overthinking it. How are you feeling? Marcus asked. I thought about the question honestly. Ready, I said. He nodded. The documents? I patted my bag. All 5. The other board members arrived between 8:50 and 9. Gerald Chu came in with his jacket already off, which I had never seen before. He was a man who wore his jacket like armor. He nodded at me and took his usual seat without speaking. The other 2 board members, a woman named Patricia Osisi, who ran a climate tech fund in Cambridge, and a semi-retired engineer named David Lim, who had known Raymond since the 90s, arrived together and sat side by side. Patricia gave me a small, careful smile. David Lim looked at the table. Raymond arrived at 8:58. He shook my hand, shook Marcus's hand, nodded at the board members, and sat at the chair immediately to my right, not at the head, deliberately. He had ceded the head to me without discussion. I noticed. I did not say anything about it. At 9:03, Diana walked in. She came through the door with Craig Hollis 1 step behind her. Craig was a broad-shouldered man in his early 50s with a blue tie and a leather portfolio and the practiced neutrality of a litigator, a face that revealed nothing on purpose. Diana was dressed in charcoal gray, tailored, precise. Her hair was done. She was wearing the particular expression she wore when she had decided that confidence was the best available armor. Chin up, shoulders back, eyes moving around the room taking inventory. Her eyes landed on me at the head of the table. Something crossed her face. Not quite surprise. More like recalibration. She sat down across from me and to the left, with Craig beside her. She placed a thin folder on the table in front of her. Craig placed his leather portfolio beside it and uncapped a pen. Raymond opened the meeting at 9:05. I've called this meeting, he said, because a legal matter has arisen regarding the founding documentation and ownership structure of Verilink Solutions. I want to be clear about the format. This is not a hearing, and it is not arbitration. This is an informational session for the board. Marcus Webb, as founding attorney for Verilink Solutions, will present the legal documentation. After that, all parties will have an opportunity to speak. He looked around the table. We'll begin with the documents. Marcus opened his top folder and began. He went through everything in order: the patent filing, number, date, named inventor, assignee, the certificate of formation, date, organizer, sole member, the founder's agreement, execution date, parties, key provisions, with particular attention to Section 9C, the USPTO confirmation letter, the cap table. He spoke for 14 minutes without interruption. His voice was the same throughout, even, precise, unhurried. He did not editorialize. He did not raise his voice. He simply read the documents and named what they said. When he finished, he placed everything in the center of the table. Craig Hollis leaned forward immediately. "If I may," Raymond raised one hand. In a moment, he looked at Diana. "Diana, I want to give you the opportunity to respond to what's been presented." Diana looked at the documents in the center of the table. Then she looked at me. "Those documents don't represent the full picture," she said. Her voice was steady. Almost. "Ashley and I had an understanding that went beyond what was written. The company was a collaborative effort from the beginning. The formal structure doesn't reflect the reality of how Verilink was actually built." "What understanding?" Raymond asked. "That we were building this together. That the legal structure was a formality." She paused. "Ashley needed me to run this company. She was in school. She wasn't here. I was the one meeting with clients, hiring staff, managing the financials. I was the one who made Verilink what it is. Do you have documentation of that understanding?" Raymond asked. Diana looked at Craig. Craig opened his leather portfolio and removed a single page. He slid it across the table. It was an email. Dated 3 years ago, from my address to Diana's. It read, "Di, you're doing great with the client side. Keep it up. The company wouldn't look the way it does without you." I remembered writing that email. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I had been in the library working on a corporate strategy case study, and Diana had just closed a significant contract with a healthcare client in Providence. I had sent her a note. 12 words of genuine acknowledgement. Craig Hollis cleared his throat. "This email demonstrates that Ms. Ashley Bennett herself acknowledged Diana's central role in building Verilink. In the context of their collaborative working relationship, it supports our position that the formal legal structure does not reflect the true nature of. The company wouldn't look the way it does without you," Marcus said, reading from the email without picking it up. He looked at Craig. "That's the sentence you're relying on." Craig kept his expression neutral. "Among other evidence, yes." Marcus looked at him for a moment. Then he reached into his folder and produced a single document, which he slid to the center of the table next to the others. "This," Marcus said, "is a declaration from the United States Patent and Trademark Office confirming that patent number US 10-847,302 was filed by Ashley Marie Bennett as sole inventor, and that no co-inventor claim has been filed, sustained, or is currently pending." He paused. "A patent cannot be filed fraudulently without criminal consequence. The USPTO does not make errors on inventor attribution. The invention is Ashley's. The company was founded on that invention. The company is Ashley's." He folded his hands, an email saying the company wouldn't look the way it does without you, he continued, "does not establish founding rights, intellectual property ownership, or equity entitlement beyond what was contractually agreed. It establishes that Ashley appreciated Diana's operational contributions." He looked at Craig, "which, for the record, are not in dispute." The room was very quiet. Craig Hollis wrote something in his portfolio. Diana looked at the table. Gerald Chu was looking at the patent filing, turning it over in his hands. Patricia Osei had her arms folded, and her expression was unreadable. Raymond spoke. "Diana, I need to ask you a direct question, and I need a direct answer." Diana looked at him. "On the evening of April 22nd, at the Wellesley Hills Country Club, did you state publicly that you built Verilink Solutions from nothing, alone, without reference to any other founder or co-founder?" Diana's jaw tightened fractionally. "I was speaking in the spirit of, did you say it?" Raymond asked, same tone. No variation, a silence that lasted perhaps 4 seconds. "Yes," Diana said, "in a room of approximately 200 people. Yes, at your sister's graduation party." Diana did not answer that one. Raymond looked at Marcus. Marcus produced the transcript, time-stamped, transcribed, formatted, and placed it in the center of the table next to the patent and the certificate of formation and the founder's agreement and the USPTO letter and the cap table and the email that Craig Hollis had submitted as evidence. 8 documents on a conference room table in Back Bay on a Thursday morning. Craig leaned in and spoke quietly to Diana. I watched her face during that conversation. She was very controlled. But her right hand, which was resting on the table, pressed flat Gagina's surface with a pressure that whitened her knuckles slightly, and I knew that whatever Craig was saying to her, it was not what she had expected to hear when she walked into this room. When he finished, Diana looked up. She looked at Raymond. She looked at Gerald Chu and Patricia Osei and David Lim. She looked at Marcus, then she looked at me. You planned this from the beginning, she said. Her voice was quiet. Not angry yet. Something more like disbelief finding its shape. I protected what I built, I said. I told you that was what I was doing. You let me believe. I let you be CFO of a $47 million company, I said. I let you travel and present and take meetings and build relationships. I let you have your name on everything, because I needed someone to do those things while I finished my education and built the next phase. You were good at it, Diana. You were genuinely good at it. I paused. But the company was never yours. You knew that. You signed the agreement that said that. And then you stood up at my graduation party and told 200 people it was. The room was completely still. Deanna's right hand was still flat on the table. Her knuckles were still white. Craig Hollis closed his leather portfolio. That can't all be real, Diana said. It came out quietly, almost to herself. Not a legal argument, something more basic than that. Raymond looked at her steadily. It's been real, he said, for 6 years. The Verilink annual gala was held on a Friday evening in early June, 6 weeks after the board meeting. The Charles Hotel, the ballroom seated 320 people, and on that night every seat was filled. Round tables with white linens and low centerpieces of dark greenery and cream roses. Someone on the events committee had a consistent aesthetic, I noticed. The kind of room that made people feel, as soon as they walked in, that they were part of something significant. Soft lighting. A string quartet in the corner playing something understated. The particular hum of 300 people who were not yet sure what the evening was going to become. I arrived at 6:45, through the side entrance, not the main entrance, not because I was hiding, but because I had spent the previous hour in a small meeting room on the second floor of the hotel with Raymond, Marcus, and the 2 lead partners from Aldridge Capital, going over the final governance documentation for the Series B. The papers had been signed that afternoon. The round was closed. $23 million, confirmed, with Verilink Solutions cap table clean and its CEO of record officially designated as Ashley Marie Bennett. The paperwork had taken 11 minutes. We had all shaken hands. One of the Aldridge partners, a woman named Soraya Khalil, who I had been in conversation with for 7 months, had looked at me across the table and said, "We've been waiting to back you specifically, not the company." I had thanked her and meant it. Then we had gone downstairs. I stood at the side entrance for a moment before going in. Through the glass I could see the room filling. Clients I recognized from the past 4 years. Investors, partners. Verilink employees in clusters near the bar, the younger ones slightly overdressed, the way young people are at their first company gala. A few faces I knew from Diana's press photos, people she had cultivated, relationships she had built, good relationships, genuinely good ones. I had meant what I said in the boardroom. She had been effective at this part of the job. Whatever had happened between us, I had never been confused about that. Diana was at the room's center when I looked through the glass. She was in deep burgundy, a good color for her, always had been, with her hair up and a glass of white wine. She was talking to someone I recognized as a client from the Providence healthcare contract, the one she had closed 3 years ago, the one I had sent her the 12-word email about. She was laughing. She looked, from the outside, like a woman who was exactly where she expected to be. She did not know I was coming. That was Raymond's decision, and I had agreed with it. After the board meeting, Diana had been formally notified that her CFO position was under review, pending the outcome of the legal proceedings. Craig Hollis had filed a challenge to the arbitration clause, which Marcus had responded to in 11 pages. The legal process was moving at its own pace, as legal processes do. Diana had not been terminated. She had not been removed from the building. She was still technically CFO, a title she held by appointment, an appointment made by the founding shareholder, which was me. She was still CFO because I had not yet signed the paper that changed that. I was going to sign it tonight, but first, Raymond had something to present. I went in through the side door at 6:58. The program was set to begin at 7, before dinner the way Raymond had arranged it. I moved along the perimeter of the room, staying near the wall, nodding at the people I passed. Theo, who saw me and straightened slightly and gave a small nod. Patricia Osi, who was near the bar and raised her glass briefly in my direction. Soraya Khalil, who had come downstairs with us and taken a table near the front. I found my seat. It was not at the head table. Raymond had placed me at a round table near the left side of the room, 3 rows back, a good sightline to the podium, not immediately visible from the entrance. I sat down. I placed my bag on the chair beside me. I smoothed the front of my dress, dark navy. Not a consignment find this time, something I had bought specifically for tonight. And looked at the program card on the table in front of me. The program had one item listed before dinner, Founder Recognition Award, presented by Raymond Holt, Chairman, Verilink Solutions Board of Directors, no recipient named. At 7:01, Raymond stepped up to the podium. The room settled quickly. Raymond had a quality, not charisma exactly, something more like gravity. When he stood at a podium, people paid attention because they had learned, over the years, that Raymond Holt did not stand at podiums to say things that were not worth hearing. "Good evening," he said. "Thank you all for being here. I'm going to keep my remarks brief because the food is going to be very good and I don't want to stand between you and it for longer than necessary." Polite laughter. The room relaxed slightly. Every year at this gathering, we present the Founder Recognition Award. It's a simple thing, a way of acknowledging the person whose original vision made this company possible. He paused. In past years, this award has been presented to Diana Bennett, our CFO, in recognition of her contributions to Verilink's growth. I watched Diana across the room. She was at the head table, 4 rows ahead of me and slightly to the right. She had turned toward the podium when Raymond began speaking, and at the mention of her name, something in her posture shifted. A small settling, the particular relaxation of a person who has been waiting to hear something and has now heard it. She did not know what was coming. "This year," Raymond continued, "I need to make a correction." The room was quiet in a different way now. "A correction to the record," Raymond said. "Verilink Solutions was founded on November 19th, 6 years ago, by one person. She filed the original patent, number US 10847, 302. 3 days before that, alone, at 2 in the morning, in a 400-square-foot apartment in Cambridge, Massachusetts." He paused. "She wrote the original code. She incorporated the company. She designed the ownership structure, assembled the board, and built the Series B relationship that I am pleased to announce closed today. $23 million with Aldridge Capital." Another pause. "She did all of this for 4 years, without asking for recognition. Tonight, I would like to correct that." Raymond looked up from his notes. "Ashley Bennett," he said, "would you please come up?" 300 people turned. I stood up from my chair at the table near the left wall, 3 rows back, and the room found me all at once. 300 heads turning at the same moment. The way a room turns when it realizes the person it was looking for was already there. I walked toward the podium. The room was very quiet at first, the particular quiet of people recalibrating, taking in new information, adjusting what they thought they knew. I was halfway to the podium when it started. Not an explosion, something more considered than that. A single person near the front began to clap, and then another, and then the whole left side of the room. And by the time I reached the podium and shook Raymond's hand, the applause was full and continuous, and the string quartet had stopped playing. I stood at the podium and looked out at the room. Theo was standing at his table, so was Patricia Osi. Soraya Khalil was clapping with both hands. Gerald Chu, at the board table near the right wall, was on his feet. I did not look at Diana immediately. I looked at the room first. 300 people, clients and partners, and investors, and the people who had built this company alongside me for 6 years, all of them learning in real time what they should have known from the beginning. Then I looked at Diana. She was sitting at the head table with her wine glass still in her hand. She had not stood. Her face was, I want to describe it accurately, because I have thought about it many times since. It was not rage. It was not tears, not yet. It was something more fundamental than either of those things. It was the expression of a person watching the story they have been telling themselves for 4 years come apart in public, all at once, in front of everyone who mattered. Her wine glass was tilting slightly in her hand. She did not seem to notice the Providence healthcare client sitting beside her, the one she had been laughing with 40 minutes ago, was looking at me. I waited for the room to settle. Then I leaned into the microphone. "Thank you," I said. "I'll keep this short. The food really is going to be good. A small ripple of laughter. The tension in the room released a fraction. 6 years ago, I had an idea and a laptop and $4,200 in my checking account. I didn't know if it would work. I didn't know if anyone would believe in it. What I knew was that the idea was sound and the math was right, and the only way to find out was to build it. I paused. So I built it. I looked at the room. Verilink is what it is because of the people in this room. The clients who took a chance on an unknown product. The partners who saw something before it was fully formed. The team, I looked at Theo, who showed up every day and made it better than I could have made it alone. Another pause. I am grateful for all of it. I am grateful for tonight. I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer and removed a single folded sheet of paper. I also have one piece of administrative business to take care of while I have the room's attention. I unfolded the paper. This is the formal designation of CEO of Verilink Solutions. Effective as of today, in connection with the close of our Series B round, I placed it on the podium. I'll be signing it after dinner, in front of witnesses, which I believe is the right way to do things. I looked up. Raymond, you'll witness? Raymond, standing to my left, said, with pleasure. I folded the paper back and put it in my pocket. Enjoy your dinner, I said. And thank you for being part of this. I stepped back from the podium. The applause came again, fuller this time. I walked back through it toward my table, and as I passed the head table, I did not stop, did not slow down, did not look directly at Diana again. But I was close enough to see, in my peripheral vision, that her wine glass had found its way to the table, that her hand was flat on the white linen, that the color had left her face entirely, and that the Providence healthcare client beside her had turned his chair, very slightly, so that he was no longer facing her. I sat back down at my table. Soraya Khalil leaned over from 2 seats away and said, quietly, that was exactly right. The string quartet started playing again. Dinner was served. The dinner lasted 2 hours. I ate. I talked to Soraya about the Series B deployment timeline. I talked to a client from Atlanta who had finally signed the enterprise contract that had been in the pipeline for 3 months. He had called me the morning after the board meeting, once the news had filtered through the right channels, and said he wanted to sign with the founder directly. I talked to Theo about the UI redesign, because Theo and I could talk about the UI redesign anywhere, including a gala, including the night everything changed. It was one of the things I appreciated most about him. I did not talk to Diana. She stayed at the head table through all 3 courses. I was aware of her the way you are aware of weather, not looking directly at it, but knowing exactly where it is and what it is doing. She ate very little. She spoke to the people around her in short exchanges, the kind of conversation you maintain when you are performing composure and spending most of your energy on the performance. The Providence healthcare client left before dessert. The chair beside her stayed empty. At 9:47, Craig Hollis arrived. He had not been on the gala guest list. I noticed him come through the main entrance in his blue tie with his leather portfolio under his arm, and I understood immediately what was happening. Diana had called him during dinner. He walked directly to her table and bent down and spoke quietly into her ear, and Diana nodded once, set her napkin on the table, and stood up. She was going to leave. That was her right. I had not expected anything else. But then Craig straightened up and looked across the room and found Raymond Holt. And he walked toward Raymond instead of toward the exit, and I understood that leaving was not quite what they had decided. I watched Craig reach Raymond's table. Raymond looked up. They exchanged a brief word. Raymond's expression did not change. He nodded once and said something I could not hear, and Craig walked back to Diana. Raymond caught my eye across the room. He gave a small, measured nod. I excused myself from the table. We reconvened in one of the hotel's side rooms, a smaller space off the main ballroom, used for breakout sessions during conferences, with a rectangular table and 8 chairs and fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly more serious than it already was. Raymond and Marcus on one side, Diana and Craig on the other. Me at the end, with my bag on the chair beside me and the folded CEO designation still in my inside pocket. Diana looked different in the fluorescent light. Not diminished exactly. Diana Bennett did not diminish easily. It was one of her qualities, but stripped of the particular glow the ballroom had given her. She looked like a person who had been in a very long fight and was beginning to understand that the fight was over. Craig opened his portfolio. My client would like to propose a resolution, he said, in the interest of avoiding prolonged arbitration and the associated reputational impact on the company. Raymond looked at Marcus. Marcus said nothing. We are prepared to acknowledge the validity of the founding documentation, Craig continued, and to accept the terms of Section 9C of the Founders' Agreement, subject to a negotiated buyout figure that reflects Diana's 4-year operational contribution to Verilink's growth. Marcus said, the buyout figure is set by the agreement. Original valuation, we're proposing a modified figure. Reflecting market contribution, the agreement does not provide for modification. Craig looked at him. Everything is negotiable. Not this, Marcus said. My client signed a contract. The contract specified terms. Those terms have been triggered. The figure is $400,000. Diana spoke for the first time since we had sat down. $400,000, she said. Her voice was controlled, but something underneath it was not. For 4 years. For everything I did, I looked at her. Diana, I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were dry. I had expected anger. Diana's anger was something I had known my whole life, quick and hot and clarifying. This was different. This was something colder and more permanent, the expression of a person revising their understanding of a very long story. You could have told me, she said, 4 years ago. You could have just told me what the structure was. I did, I said. You signed the agreement. That's not the same as telling me. I thought about that. Honestly, I thought about it. Maybe not, I said. But Diana, you stood up at my graduation party and told 200 people you built my company alone. You didn't do that by accident. You didn't misspeak. You made a choice. I paused. You had been making that choice for 4 years. Every interview, every press quote, every time someone said Diana's company and you didn't correct them. I looked at her steadily. I was patient with that for a long time. I let it go because it was useful and because the alternative was a conversation I didn't want to have at a holiday dinner. But there was always going to be a point where it stopped being something I could let go. Diana looked at the table. The graduation party, she said. That was the point. Yes, a silence. Craig cleared his throat. If we could return to the question of the buyout figure, 400,000, Marcus said. As written, Craig looked at Diana. Diana was still looking at the table. She had both hands flat on the surface, and I noticed again the way her knuckles went white under pressure, the same thing I had seen in the boardroom. A habit she probably did not know she had. There's one more thing. Raymond said. Everyone looked at him. He had been quiet through most of this, sitting with his hands folded, watching. The CFO position, he said. Effective immediately, the appointment is withdrawn. That's my decision as board chairman, within my authority under the company bylaws. He looked at Diana without unkindness. You will receive a full severance package consistent with your employment agreement. 4 years of service at CFO level, it's a generous package. Marcus has the figures. Marcus slid a single page across the table. Craig picked it up and read it. His expression shifted slightly, not surprise, but the particular recalibration of a litigator who has just seen a number that is better than expected. Diana did not reach for the page. I want to ask you something, she said. She was still looking at the table, and then she looked up and looked at me directly. What happens now, with the company? What do you actually do with it? I thought about the question. I thought about the 34-page Series B deck, and the Aldrich Capital letter, and Soraya Khalil saying, we've been waiting to back you specifically, and the Atlanta Enterprise contract, and the UI redesign, and the 12 screens Theo and I had been working through for 3 weeks. I build it, I said. Diana looked at me for a long moment, then she looked at Craig and said, accept the terms. Craig paused for exactly 1 second, then he wrote something in his portfolio and nodded. Marcus produced the formal acceptance documents. He had brought them. Of course he had brought them. Marcus brought everything and slid them across the table. Craig reviewed them. Diana signed without reading past the first page. I noticed that. The same thing she had done 4 years ago, on page 31 of the Founders' Agreement. The same quick, slightly cramped signature, next to the printed date. Some habits are very hard to break. Raymond gathered the signed documents. Marcus made copies on his phone. Craig closed his portfolio and buttoned his jacket. The fluorescent room did its flat, indifferent work on all of us. Diana stood up. She picked up her clutch from the chair beside her. She straightened her jacket. She looked at me one last time across the rectangular table, and her face in the fluorescent light was composed and exhausted and, I want to say this accurately, not entirely without dignity. Whatever else Diana Bennett was, she was not a person who fell apart in rooms where other people were watching. She had learned that the same way I had learned patience. In the same house. From the same woman. Congratulations, she said. It came out flat, not warm, but she said it. Thank you. I said. She walked out. Craig Hollis followed. The door closed. The three of us, Raymond, Marcus, me, sat in the fluorescent room for a moment without speaking. Then Raymond reached into his jacket pocket and produced a pen and placed it on the table in front of me. I reached into my inside pocket and removed the folded sheet of paper. CEO designation, Verilink Solutions. Effective today. I unfolded it and smoothed it flat on the table. I signed it. Raymond signed as witness. Marcus signed as witness. 3 signatures. Clean. Marcus picked up the document and placed it in his folder. Raymond capped his pen and put it back in his pocket. Dinner's probably still going, Raymond said. Dessert, Marcus said. I like dessert, Raymond said. We went back into the ballroom. The string quartet was playing something I recognized but could not name. The room was warm and full, and the centerpieces of dark greenery and cream roses looked exactly the same as they had 2 hours ago, indifferent to everything that had happened in the small room off the hall. 300 people eating dessert and talking and laughing and being part of something. I sat back down at my table. Soraya Khalil was still there, with a cup of coffee and a plate of something chocolate. All done? She said. All done, I said. She poured me a coffee from the carafe on the table. I drank it slowly and listened to the string quartet and watched the room go about its evening. Outside the hotel, somewhere on Bennett Street, I had always found that detail quietly amusing. Diana Bennett was getting into a car. I did not know where she was going. I did not need to know. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. 8 months passed. I am not going to compress them into a highlight reel of victories, because that is not how 8 months feel when you are living them. They feel like work. They feel like early mornings and late evenings, and conversations that go longer than expected, and problems that turn out to be different problems than you thought they were when you started solving them. They feel like Theo appearing in your office doorway with a UI question at 4:50 on a Friday. They feel like Marcus calling with a legal update in a tone that tells you whether it is good news or bad news before he says a single word. They felt, mostly, like exactly what I had wanted them to feel like for 6 years. The arbitration challenge Craig Hollis had filed was withdrawn 14 days after the gala. Marcus called me on a Tuesday morning to tell me, in the same even tone he used for everything, and I said thank you and went back to the product review I had been in the middle of. The buyout was processed 30 days after that. $400,000, as written, transferred to Diana's account on a Wednesday afternoon. Marcus confirmed it. I noted it. I moved on. The Series B deployment began in July. Soraya Khalil and the Aldridge team were exactly what they had presented themselves to be. Precise, patient, genuinely interested in the product rather than just the valuation. We had our first deployment meeting in the second week of July, around a conference table with 8 people and a very good espresso machine. And I remember thinking, sitting at the head of that table, that this was what it was supposed to feel like. Not the money, not the validation. The work done properly, with the right people in the right room. We hired 11 people between July and November. Theo promoted 2 members of the engineering team who had been waiting too long for it. I made both calls personally, sitting in my office with the Charles River visible through the window. And both conversations were short and good, and the kind of thing you remember for a long time. The Atlanta Enterprise contract closed in August. $6 million, 3-year term. The client, his name was Marcus too, which created occasional confusion on calls, sent a bottle of bourbon to the office with a note that said, "Finally. Well worth the wait." Theo put the bourbon in the kitchen cabinet, and nobody touched it for 2 weeks because everyone was too busy. Then someone opened it on a Friday afternoon and it was gone by 6. In September, a reporter from Boston Business Journal called and asked for an interview. Not the same reporter who had written the April story about Diana's allegations. A different one, younger, who had been covering the Boston tech scene for 18 months and had been, she told me, following Verilink's trajectory for most of that time. I agreed to the interview. We met at a coffee shop, Newbury Street, 3 blocks from the consignment shop where I had bought the $42 dress. She asked good questions. She had done her research. At the end of the interview, she asked me what I wanted people to know about Verilink that they did not already know. I thought about it for a moment. That it was built quietly, I said. Not secretly. Quietly. There's a difference. Some things need to be built in a certain kind of silence before they're ready to be seen. I think we confuse silence with absence sometimes. We assume that if we can't see someone working, they must not be working. I paused. I was always working. The article ran in October. It was 400 words, which was the right length. The headline was, Verilink CEO Ashley Bennett, Building in Silence. My mother sent it to me with a text message that said simply, I read this 3 times. I did not respond immediately. I sat with it for a while. Then I called her. She picked up on the second ring. There was a pause before either of us said anything. The particular pause of two people who have a lot of ground to cover and are not sure which direction to start walking. I should have asked more questions, my mother said finally. A long time ago. I should have asked you more questions about what you were building. You were proud of Diana, I said. That wasn't wrong. I wasn't proud enough of you. I sat with that too. You're proud of me now, I said. I'll take it. My mother made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite crying, and was somehow both. We talked for 40 minutes. About the company, about the apartment I had bought in Beacon Hill. 3 bedrooms, high ceilings, a view of the State House dome that I had not fully gotten used to yet. About her garden. About Thanksgiving, which was 6 weeks away and which we had not discussed since the graduation party made every family occasion feel like unexploded ordnance. We decided to do Thanksgiving at my apartment. Small, just the two of us and my aunt from Providence, and my father's old college roommate, who turned out, when encountered outside the context of a country club dinner, to be a moderately interesting person, with strong opinions about sweet potato preparation. It was a good Thanksgiving. Nothing dramatic happened. The food was good, and the conversation was careful, in the way early. Conversations are careful when people are finding their footing again. And my mother helped me with the dishes afterward, and we stood at the kitchen sink together looking out at the city, and she said, I'm sorry, Ashley, just that, 3 words. And I said, I know, Mom. And that was enough. Sometimes 3 words are exactly enough. Diana did not come to Thanksgiving. I had not invited her. I was not ready for that, and I did not pretend to be ready for something I was not ready for. There are people who would say we should have sat at the same table in November, that reconciliation should move faster, that family requires a certain velocity of forgiveness. Maybe they are right. But I had spent 6 years doing things on my own timeline, and I was not about to stop, because the cultural expectation was that sisters make up quickly. Deanna and I would find our way back to something, or we would not. And either way, it would happen at the pace it actually happened, and not the pace anyone thought it should. I knew that much about myself by now. In November, Verilink was approached by a private equity firm out of New York that expressed interest in a potential acquisition at a preliminary valuation of $180 million. I read the email. I forwarded it to Raymond and Marcus. I asked Raymond to set up an exploratory call for January. Then I closed the email and went back to the product review I had been in the middle of. There was work to do. There was always work to do. And for the first time in 6 years, I was doing it entirely in the open. My name on the door, my name on the patent, my name on the CEO designation that Marcus had filed with the state and the board and the investors and anyone else who needed to know. My name on everything that had always been mine. On a Thursday morning in late November, 3 days before Thanksgiving, I went back to the Cambridge neighborhood where I had lived when I started Verilink. I do not know exactly why. I had a meeting in Kendall Square, and I walked instead of taking a car, and the route took me past the street where the apartment building was. I stood outside it for a moment. 4 stories, brick, the kind of building that has been there long enough to look permanent. The window of my old apartment was on the 3rd floor, second from the left. The light was on. Someone else lived there now, had lived there for years. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the window. November in Cambridge smells like cold air and dead leaves and something faintly metallic from the river. I had forgotten that. Or not forgotten, just not thought about it for a long time. I thought about the November night 6 years ago, when I sat at the desk in that apartment and filed a patent for an idea I had been turning over in my mind for 2 years. Cold coffee, a second-hand laptop, $4,200 in my checking account. No one to call. I had been so certain that night that the idea was right, not confident. Certainty and confidence are different things. Confident is about how you feel. Certain is about what you know. I had not felt confident that night. I had felt alone and tired and slightly afraid, the way you feel at 2 in the morning when you are about to do something that cannot be undone. But I had been certain the idea was right. I looked at the window for another moment. Then I put my hands in my pockets and turned and walked toward Kendall Square. Past the coffee shop that had been there when I lived there and was still there now, past the students moving between buildings with their heads down against the cold, past the particular rhythm of a neighborhood that does not stop for anyone, Verilink's Q4 numbers were going to be strong. I could feel it in the pipeline, in the Atlanta contract, in the 3 enterprise leads Theo had flagged the previous week. Raymond had suggested we look at a second office in New York in the spring. The UI redesign was nearly complete. 12 screens, exactly right. The bourbon was gone, but someone had replaced it with a very good scotch that no one had opened yet. I had a meeting in 20 minutes. I walked faster. There is something I want to say to you. Whoever you are watching this, I spent 6 years building something real while someone else took the credit. And I want to be honest with you. I did not do it gracefully every single day. There were holiday dinners where I sat with my hands in my lap and felt something ugly and small that I am not proud of. There were nights when the patience felt less like strategy and more like cowardice, when I wondered whether I had structured everything so carefully, not because I was building towards something, but because I was afraid to simply stand up and say, "This is mine." I do not know the full answer to that. I am still thinking about it. What I know is this: the documents were real, the work was real. And when the moment came, not the moment I planned for, but the one that actually arrived, at a graduation party with cream-colored roses and a jazz quartet and my sister at a microphone, I was ready, not because I had planned every detail, because I had never stopped working. Whatever you are building right now, whatever you are doing quietly, in whatever small apartment or late-night desk or early morning hour that no one else sees, keep going. Your name is on it. It was always on it. The world will catch up eventually. If this story meant something to you, leave a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. Like this video if you have ever built something in silence. Subscribe if you believe that the truth, documented and patient and undeniable, always finds its way into the room. I'll see you in the next one.